Precious Remedies Against Satan's Devices, a study done by Thomas Brooks. And we are at chapter 4, and chapter 4 is all about 8 devices that are named as such. Satan's devices to keep souls in a sad, doubting, questioning, and uncomfortable condition. That is a sad, very sad device that Satan uses against God's children, and especially against those who want to do service and holy duties. We are at the last device, and device 8 is by persuading them that their estate is not good, their hearts are not upright, their graces are not sound, because they are so followed, vexed, and tormented with temptations. It is his method first to weary and vex thy soul with temptations, and then to tempt the soul that surely it is not beloved, because it is so much tempted. And by this stratagem he keeps many precious souls in a sad, doubting, and mourning temper for many, many years, as many of the precious sons of Zion have found by woeful experience. And Satan may so tempt as to make a saint weary of his life. Job 10 verse 1, my soul is weary of my life. The first remedy against this device of Satan is solemnly to consider that those that have been best and most beloved have been most tempted by Satan. Though Satan can never rob a Christian of his crown, yet such is his malice, that he will therefore tempt, that he may spoil them of their comforts. Such is his enmity to the Father, that the nearer and dearer any child is to him, the more will Satan trouble him and vex him with temptations. I must say, as soon as you start to see through all the attempts that evil is doing against you, the more you see the dynamics and the way they work, the lesser grip they eventually get. It takes years, but eventually you can succeed, that the attacks become lesser and lesser. I can remember that the Father said to me that I had to sit in a chair for half an hour and speak to evil and say that I knew who their boss was and what they were doing, and that I knew their workings and so on. And I did this, and just before the 30th minute went in, I heard a voice saying, well, leave this one because it knows too much. So this is how the Father has helped me, to make me more stronger. And over the years, the Father has taught me to see the mechanics, dynamics, and workings of evil. And he is constantly leading me to information and sources about spiritual warfare and so on, and about the great spirits and so, whom create the most havoc, like the Jezebel spirit. But if you are not making the steps to the Father to ask, okay, Father, I'm done with this, show me what is going on, and learn me what spiritual warfare is, as soon as you do not do such things, the attacks become worse and worse and worse. But as soon as you start doing this, and the Father is leading you to several sources of information that trains you to know thy enemy, then in combination with asking the Father's help to overcome the things of the flesh, then eventually you can become stronger and stronger. The more will Satan trouble him and vex him with temptations. Christ himself was most near and most dear, most innocent and most excellent, and yet none so much tempted as Christ. David was dearly beloved, and yet by Satan tempted to number thy people. To number the people, that was Satan's idea. Job was highly praised by God himself, and yet much tempted. Witness those said things that fell from his mouth when he was wet to the skin. Peter was much prized by Christ. Witness that choice testimony that Christ gave of his faith and happiness, and his showing him his glory in the mount, and that eye of pity that he cast upon him after his fearful fall, and yet tempted by Satan. And the Lord saith, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for thee, that thy faith fail thee not. Luke 22, verse 31 and 32. Paul had the honor of being exalted as high as heaven, and of seeing that glory that could not be expressed, and yet he was no sooner stepped out of heaven, but he is buffeted by Satan, lest he should be exalted above measure. If these that were so really, so glorious, so eminently beloved of God, if these that have lived in heaven and set their feet upon the stars have been tempted, let no saints judge themselves not to be beloved. Because they are tempted, it is as natural for saints to be tempted that are dearly beloved as it is for the sun to shine, or for a bird to sing. The eagle complains not of her wings, nor the peacock of his train, nor the nightingale of her voice, because these are natural to them. No more should saints of their temptations, because they are natural to them. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The second remedy against this device of Satan is to consider that all the temptations that befall the saints shall be sanctified to them by a hand of love. The choice experiences that the saints get of the power of the living God supporting them, of the wisdom of the living God directing them so to handle their spiritual weapons, their graces, as not only to resist but to overcome, of the mercy and goodness of the Lord pardoning and succoring of them. And therefore saith Paul, I received the messenger of Satan for to buffet me, lest I should be exalted, lest I should be exalted above measure. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 7. Twice in that verse he begins with it and ends with it. If he had not been buffeted, who knows how his heart would have swelled. He might have been carried higher in conceit than before he was in his ecstasy. Temptation is God's school, wherein he gives his people the clearest and sweetest discoveries of his love, a school wherein God teaches his people to be more frequent and fervent in duty. When Paul was buffeted, then he prayed thrice. Frequently and fervently, a school wherein God teaches his people to be more tender, meek, and compassionate to other poor, tempted souls than ever. A school wherein God teaches his people to see a greater evil in sin than ever, and a greater emptiness in the creature than ever. A school wherein God will teach his people that all temptations are but his goldsmiths. Wow. By which he will try and refine and make his people more bright and glorious. The issue of all temptations shall be to the good of the saints, as you may see by the temptations that Adam and Eve and Christ and David and Job and Peter and Paul met with. Those hands of power and love that bring light out of darkness, good out of evil, sweet out of bitter, life out of death, heaven out of hell, will bring much sweet and good to his people out of all the temptations that come upon them. Then the third remedy against this device of Satan is wisely to consider that no temptations do hurt or harm the saints so long as they are resisted by them, and prove the greatest afflictions that can befall them. It is not Satan's tempting, but your assenting, not his enticing, but your yielding, that makes temptations hurtful to your soul. So the more you go along with these temptations, the more you hurt your own soul. If the soul, when it is tempted, resists temptation, and saith with Christ, "Get thee behind me, Satan," and with that young comfort, "I am not the man I was," or as Luther counsels all men to answer all temptations with these words, "I am a Christian. If a man's temptation be his greatest affliction, then is the temptation no sin upon his soul, though it be a trouble upon his mind." When a soul can look the Lord in the face and say, "Ah, Lord, I have many outward troubles upon me. I have lost such and such a near mercy and such desirable mercies, and yet thou that knowest the heart, thou knowest that all my crosses and losses do not make so many wounds in my soul, nor fetch so many sighs from my heart, or tears from my eyes, as those temptations do that Satan follows my soul with." When it is thus with the soul, then temptations are only the soul's trouble. They are not the soul's sin. Satan is a malicious and envious enemy. As his names are, so is he. His names are all names of enmity: the accuser, the tempter, the destroyer, the devourer, the envious one. And this malice and envy of his he shows sometimes by tempting men to such sins as are quite contrary to the temperature of their bodies, as he did Vespasian and Julian, men of sweet and excellent natures, to be most bloody murderers. And sometimes he shows his malice by tempting men to such things as will bring them no honor nor profit. "Fall down and worship me," he tempts to blasphemy and atheism. the thoughts and first notions and motions co- uh, whereof cause the heart and flesh to tremble. And sometimes he shows his malice by tempting them to those sins which they have not found their natures prone to, and which they abhor in others. Now, if the soul resists these, and complains of these, and groans and mourns under these, and looks up to the Lord Jesus to be delivered from these, then shall they not put down to the soul's account, but to Satan's, who shall be so much more tormented. By how much the more the saints have been by him maliciously tempted, so make present and peremptory resistance against Satan's temptations, bid defiance to the temptation at first sight. It is safe to resist, it is a dangerous to dispute. Even lost herself and her posterity by falling into lists of dispute, when she should have resisted and stood upon terms of defiance with Satan. He that would stand in the hour of temptation must plead with Christ. It is written, he that would triumph over temptations must plead. Still, it is written, Satan is bold and impudent, and if you are not peremptory in your resistance, he will give you fresh onsets. It is your greatest honor and your highest wisdom peremptorily to withstand the beginnings of a temptation, for an after remedy comes often too late. Man must not seek to resist Satan's craft with craft, but by open defiance. He shoots with Satan in his own bow, who thinks by disputing and reasoning to put him off. As soon as a temptation shows its face, say to the temptation, as Ephraim to his idols, get you hence, what have I any more to do with you? Hosea 14 verse 8. O say to the temptation, as David said to the sons of Zeruiah, what have I to do with you? 2 Samuel 16 verse 10. You will be too hard for me. He that doth thus resist temptations shall never be undone by temptations. Make strong and constant resistance against Satan's temptations. Make resistance against temptations by arguments drawn from the honor of the love of the living God, the love of the living God, your union and communion with the living God, and from the blood of Christ, the death of Christ, the kindness of Christ, the intercession of Christ, and the glory of Christ, and from the voice of the Spirit, the counsel of the Spirit, the comforts of the Spirit, the presence of the Spirit, the seal of the Spirit, the whisperings of the Spirit, the commands of the Spirit, the assistance of the Spirit, the witness of the Spirit, and from the glory of heaven, the excellency of grace, the beauty of holiness, the worth of the soul, and the vileness or bitterness and evil of sin, the least sin being a greater evil than the greatest temptation in the world. And look that you make constant resistance as well as strong resistance. Be constant in arms. So that's why we need to have our armor constantly put on. Satan will come on with new temptations when old ones are too weak. In a calm prepare, or preparation better said, for a storm. The tempter is restless, impudent, and subtle. He will suit his temptations to your constitutions and inclinations. Satan loves to sail with the wind. If your knowledge be weak, he will tempt you to error. If your conscience be tender, he will tempt you to scrupulosity. Scrupulosity and to much priceness. As to do nothing but hear, pray, and read. If your conscience be wide and large, he will tempt you to carnal security. If you are bold-spirited, he will tempt you to presumption. If timorous, to desperation. If flexible, to inconstancy. If proud and stiff, to gross folly. Therefore still fit for fresh assaults. Make one victory a step to another. When you have overcome a temptation, take heed of unbending your bow. And look well to it that your bow be always bent, and that it remains in strength when you have overcome one temptation. You must be ready to enter the list with another. As distrust in some sense is the mother of safety, so security is the gate of danger. A man had need to fear this most of all. Then he fears not at all. If Satan be always roaring, we should be always a watching and resisting of him. That's why we have our armor 24/7 on. And put it on before you go do your daily duties and before you go to sleep. Twice a day I put on the armor. And certainly he that makes strong and constant resistance of Satan's temptations shall in the end get above his temptations, and for the present is secure enough from being ruined by his temptations. For a close of this, remember that it is dangerous to yield to the least sin to be rid of the greatest temptation. To take this course were as if a man should think to wash himself clean in ink, or as if a man should exchange a light cross made of paper for an iron cross, which is heavy, toilsome, and bloody. The least sin is set home upon the conscience will more wound, vex, and oppress the soul than all the temptations in the world can. Therefore never yield to the least sin to be rid of the greatest temptations. So Sidonius Apollinarius relateth how a certain man named Maximus, arriving at the top of honor by indirect means, was the first day very much wearied, and fetching a deep sigh, said, O Damocles, how happy do I esteem of thee for having been a king but the space of a dinner. I will do this again because the kitty was hanging in my leg. For having been a king but the space of a dinner, I have been one whole day and can bear it no longer. I will leave you to make the application. And with this said, I finally have come to the end of chapter 4. We only have left chapter 2, and then we have come to the end of the journey of this study book, Precious Remedies Against Satan's Devices. And I would highly recommend you to buy this study book yourselves. It is from Thomas Brooks, a Puritan, and please do so. It is a very learning journey to go through. All right, thank you so much for listening, and God bless you.